Great. We're live now, so let's go ahead and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I've asked Commissioner Daly to share a thought. Sorry, Kevin, we didn't realize you were going to be gone on the last one, so we'll have you do this one this week.
No, that's okay. I think, I don't know, I didn't give you a lot of warning last time, but anyway. So really quickly, I'll make this really brief. I wanted to talk, it's July, obviously, and it seems to be in a lot of ways, you know, a month of festivals and celebrations and parties, I guess you could say. Although things have been a little bit different this year. So keeping with my general theme of kind of Centerville history, I guess you could say, I was just going to give a real brief rundown of some of the 4th of July activities in Centerville. So what's interesting is, you know, these days, Centerville's known for the 4th of July parade and all that other business that goes on around the 4th of July. Bountiful takes the 24th of July with the Handcart Days parade and stuff. In the early days, probably the first half of the 20th century, it was Bountiful that had the big 4th of July parade. And Centerville didn't start really doing a 4th of July celebration until the late 40s and early 50s. In the late 40s, it started out with what they call the miniature parade, which was essentially the kids' parade. And then by the early 50s, the JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce, together with by the early 50s, the 3 LDS wards in Centerville were sponsoring together a big 4th of July celebration. It was about that same time, actually, 1949, Bountiful started its first Handcart Days celebration. For a while, they ran both the 4th of July and the 24th of July, and it wasn't until later that they essentially dropped their 4th of July stuff and just did the 24th and left the 4th for Centerville. But in what I thought was interesting there was that it was the JCs and the LDS wards together who kind of sponsored the 4th of July stuff, and it wasn't the city till later. Anyway, it just makes me grateful for the city that we live in. It makes me grateful for the sense of community that we have. So I tell people all the time that Centerville has a small town kind of a feel because there's, you know, not too many of us, and it doesn't take long before you talk about somebody that you know, because Centerville people, we all know each other. So grateful for that. And I'm glad to be able to serve on this planning commission to help, you know, kind of keep making Centerville great. And with that, I'll offer a brief prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity we have to meet as a planning commission and to discuss the important items of business in the city. We ask you to bless that we can do what's right for the residents of Centerville and for the city as a whole. And we ask you to bless that we can continue as planning commissioners to work well together, to share our thoughts and have healthy discussions. And we ask you to bless that we can always remember that we're serving the residents of the city. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thanks, Kevin. I always appreciate learning about history. I hope that you always continue to do that. It's exciting for me. Okay, first item on our agenda, we have invited the city's tree board to come meet with us, and we're really excited about this. Becky is the one who raised the issue, and I'm so glad that we're going to do it. So I will turn the time over to staff.
Or maybe we could turn the time over to
Yeah, I didn't.
tree board chair.
I'm totally happy to do that. Cory, did you guys want to introduce anything before we just invite the tree board forward?
No, this was something that you desired to have a discussion with them. So we're letting you run with however it goes.
Fabulous. All right, well, I'll turn the time over to the tree board. You guys can introduce yourselves to us.
All right, my name is Joy Chambers and I am the chair of the City Tree Board. And after I talk and just kind of introduce us, I have asked each of the members to just take a couple minutes to share who they are so you guys can get to know everyone. I think we have everyone except for one of our members in attendance tonight, and he was on fire watch duty tonight because of some lightning. So he said that he would try to come, but he might not be here. So, and it looks like he's not here. Anyway, we are really appreciative of you guys inviting us and having this opportunity to just explain who we are and kind of share some of our thoughts. This board has been around for a little, almost 2 years, I guess. I think around October 2 years ago was when we started. And the duties of the tree board is specifically just in the ordinance. It says that we are an advisory and voluntary capacity to city council and other departments. And some of the duties that we have are providing guidance on the planning, maintaining, and removing of trees on public property and within the public park strips. So that's kind of where we stand and what we kind of work on. And so we're definitely here to support any, specifically with you guys with planning, any type of information that as you guys look forward into planning things for our city, ways that we can incorporate trees, benefits of trees. We are also, our city is also a Tree City USA. And so there's some things that we do with that as well. But one of our things is to help educate both the city as well as the community about trees and how we can kind of stay green in our community. And just how we can support that. So I'm going to turn the time over to Anne next, and she'll introduce herself and share a couple of things. Go ahead, Anne.
Okay, thank you. I'm Ann Linton, and I've enjoyed working on the tree board with Joy and the others. I've learned a lot, and I'm kind of passionate about trees in urban environments. I just got back from the eye doctors, and I've got irises, pupils this big, so I hope I can read my notes. Briefly, I know that we're going all around, so I'll be brief, but advantages of trees in urban environment is that, and I'll list only 4, even though there are many more, but it reduces the urban heat index by as much as 20% in a home, reduces the energy consumption. And so on my street, I live on 1825 North, and there were huge elm trees that needed to be taken down. But the difference it's made on those homes that now have no heat protection has been about 20% in the summer, especially. It also helps control the storm and water drainage, reduces the stress on the storm infrastructure because it slows and absorbs the water, helping a city. And third, it helps clean the air and water. We know the benefits of that. But most importantly, Joy mentioned that we are a tree city. There are requirements for that. There are advantages to being a tree city, and especially a tree neighborhood, a tree street. It increases property value to a neighborhood that has trees is much more desirable and preferable to a neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of trees. I was just today roaming streets, and you're probably familiar with the neighborhood southwest of Pages Lane and Main Street. They have 5-foot sidewalks and curving streets and a canopy of flowering pear trees that is now 20 years old. And it's a beautiful street. Without that, those homes wouldn't have the same look. It's just a gorgeous neighborhood now. And that's close to us all. So I'd encourage us all to just take a look at that neighborhood. That is desirable. That's what happens when a planning commission plans, instead of a 3-foot, which precludes any tree, to even a 5-foot or a 6-foot park strip in front of the homes. So I would encourage everybody to look at that, because that's an example of what can be done when a planning commission plans that into future developments. And with that, I've taken my 2 or 3 minutes.
Gary Woodward, will you go next?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Gary Woodward, and we have done quite a bit over the last couple of years, and most of it has been involving talking about trees and their value. So as Anne just talked about, there's a real value to having trees. We know that there's a cost to having trees, especially when we're talking about planting trees in the parking strip, because that's where the utilities are, and the roots interfere with the utilities, as well as sprinkler systems and all those kinds of things. But there is also a value to having a tree. And we feel like those things that Anne mentioned and others emphasize the importance of having trees on our streets and in our neighborhoods. And so that we think that the value of having a tree outweighs the costs. And so we need to consider the value, not just the cost. As was mentioned, our ordinance currently says that if your park strip is 4 feet wide, you can have trees. Many of the park strips in our city are currently not 4 feet wide. The neighborhood that I live in does not have 4 foot wide park strips. And so the trees that are currently there are all right, but as soon as those trees die or need to be replaced, we could not replant those trees because of the width of the park strip. Many cities require an 8 or 10 foot wide park strip in order to have trees, which makes more sense. It does, the width of the park strip is critical to have a tree that can be healthy and that can grow. And if we have a wider park strip, so we would encourage maybe to consider neighborhoods that are being changed or rebuilt or redone, the sidewalks or other streets, other things to figure out a way to make those park strips wider so that street trees would be able to be planted. Another thing that we can consider is having, like in new developments, having planting nodes or curving the sidewalks so that we can have a space for those trees to be planted. Instead of planting all up and down the street, maybe we just make a node where you could plant those trees if that becomes a problem, where we don't have room to have the park strip be 6 or 8 or 10 feet wide. So that's the things that I would like to say that we've considered and that we'd like you to consider in future developments. So I'll end my time and let somebody else move ahead.
Grant?
There you go. All right. Hello. I'm here, Grant. Is anybody out there?
We can hear you, Grant.
Yes,
Okay,
go for it.
Thank you. Grant Chavez. I'm a certified arborist. Worked parks for the county, Salt Lake County, for about 18 years and moved up here to this lovely spot. Yes, we are a tree city. I think it's very important that we try to protect as many as we can. Let's see, what I was going to talk about was that I've heard that there's a lot of aging people here. And that is going to cause a lot of turmoil with the trees as people move in and try to build board cubes where there once was a nice house and a half-acre of ground, with one driveway down the middle and nothing but high rise on each side, 2 stories. I don't know if you guys have done anything with that yet, but in addition to those 8-foot curbs in new developments, which would be awesome, or the serpentine sidewalks, which are also very nice, we need to come up with something in order to keep them from cutting down all the trees on some of these old properties. We also need to reach out to our elderly who might need help, who cannot sustain what they used to have or that they have there. There are at least 5 different places in Salt Lake County, Tree, Utah, Salt Lake County, Green, Urban. Anyway, they'll come and harvest your fruit. There's 5 different places there. For some reason, Davis County doesn't have any. I'm not suggesting you guys need to go out and start one right now, but they bring volunteers to your property and pick all your fruit and share it with the less fortunate. This is a pretty good program in Salt Lake. It's fairly well thriving. Then also, I think maybe some of our volunteers with our Boy Scouts and things like that, they could set up some of the elderly people who have limbs down or trees that need to be trimmed and that kind of stuff. If they could set up a volunteer thing with that, that would be awesome. And those are just some of my thoughts. Thank you for your time.
All right, Gary Smith.
Gary, it looks like you're still muted. There we go.
Okay, so can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
I've been asked to talk about a few things we've done already. We were asked right at the beginning to come up with a list of trees that would be suitable for a park strip environment. We've submitted that to the city council, and they're looking at it to determine what they want to do going forward. We've also done some exploration in other cities' tree ordinances, and we kind of came up with a draft of many things that the city council could incorporate into a tree ordinance for Centerville City. Right now, our tree ordinance is like 1 or 2 pages. The draft that we gave them was 30 or 40 pages long. So they've got a lot to sift through and see what they want to do. And I'm sure that's a long-term project, especially during the COVID problems, that they've got other things to deal with. But we've submitted those 2 items to the city council. They're aware of them, and they're going to go forward and send them back to us for corrections or review or whatever needs to be done in the future. But that's kind of what we've been doing for the last 2 years.
Thanks, Gary. So that's all of the members of our board. We've got one more who, like I said, that isn't here. And so I want to give you guys a chance to ask questions if you have questions. But some of the things that we have noticed and seen before I do that is, like has been mentioned, in a city, there's trees and there's benefits and needs for trees, and there's also issues that trees can cause. And so there's kind of that balancing act of how do we encourage trees? How do we encourage this, utilizing them and in a way that can best be managed? And so that's one of the things that we talk about and discuss. One of the things that also was brought up that sometimes that some other cities have done is they understand that trees are kind of a cyclical thing, meaning there's a point where a tree may become no longer, like it's too big for the area or something. And there's cities who they plan this into their budget of that, after 30 years or 40 years or, whatever the cycle is that's going to work for this tree, they'll cut it down, and then they replace it. with a new tree, so that there's not just these trees grow big and then we cut them down because they're too big, and then there's no replacing. And that's one of the things that we've kind of seen in our city, where there's been a lot of the big trees that have been taken down, whether it's due to like on 1825, where it was due to there's problems with the sidewalks, and so we're just going to cut them all down, but there was no replacing, there was no plan for replacing. And then just over the past 3 weeks in my neighborhood, there were 8 trees that were taken down. Again, no plan of replacing. So if that's kind of our goal of, well, we're going to take down all the trees as they get big, but not replace, we will eventually get to a point where are the trees and the benefits of trees. So there's kind of this balance of, you know, here's things that we can do to actually encourage trees. And like was brought up, you know, we have an older, there's a lot of people that are older that are kind of like, I can't take care of my trees. So how can we encourage, you know, maybe the community helping to take care of these trees so that we can keep trees, so that we can encourage this. So there's some of those types of things that we've talked about and discussed. And it is a concern for us. Excuse me. It is a concern for us, as well as, you know, just some of these suggestions for like the planning commission, where, you know, these things like, hey, if we have wider park strips, like Farmington in some of their new developments, they have wider park strips, and they're planting trees in those park strips. And the wider park strips are able to handle a tree better than our narrow ones, you know? So some of those types of things that we feel like could possibly be beneficial for you guys to know and understand. So anyway, that's us in a really fast forwarded motion of here's kind of what we've been thinking and planning and talking about. But if you have questions, let us know.
That was really helpful. I'm so excited. You guys are all so passionate about this, and you divided that in a very clever way. Everybody was talking about a specific area, so thank you very much for that. Several of you mentioned that we're a tree city. Can you just explain to me what does that mean? Like what does it mean? Somebody said that there are advantages to being a tree city. What are the advantages for that?
Good evening.
I think that's what Scott was going to talk about too, I believe.
Yeah. Hey, this is Scott.
Oh, perfect.
I'm jumping in on the meeting. I appreciate all the fellow tree board folks who spoke already. I'll answer that question regarding Tree City USA. There are 4 requirements to become a Tree City USA. The first of which is to have a tree ordinance in place within your municipal code. The second is to spend at least $2 per capita on the care, maintenance, and promotion of trees as a long-term sustainable natural resource in your city. The third is to proclaim and celebrate Arbor Day each year. And the fourth one is to have a designee in your city who's responsible, whether it's a tree care department or a public works department, some formal assignment of trees as natural resources under the city's jurisdiction. In most cities, that falls upon lands that are controlled by the city. It include the parks, perhaps trail systems, certainly the city administration buildings, and not a unique case in Centerville. It is the existence of trees in the public rights of way or the park strip. So those are the four essential requirements to become a Tree City USA. The advantage is, from the state's perspective, and particularly the agency I work for, Department of Natural Resources, is that you're available to work within a network of like cities who are facing some of the very same challenges that we face here in Centerville. There are models of challenge and success and adaptation. There are models of developing professionalism within the city works, public works department by promoting arboriculture as a trade certification. There are ways to promote Arbor Days that keeps interest in trees and volunteers coming forth to donate their time, interests, and passions towards trees. So Tree City USA is a national program. There's over 85 cities in Utah that participate in Tree City USA. It includes the continental United States, and also Tree City is recognized in all the many military bases overseas for which the United States operates its Defense Department arms. It's a long-lived program, and it's just it's a way for people to recognize commitment to trees as natural resources and to formalize a network of people and professionals and volunteers that are concerned and promote the stewardship of trees.
Thank you. That very handily answered my question. I have a couple of other questions, but I would love if any of my other fellow commissioners have questions. I don't want to dominate.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Well, I have a couple of questions, but I'll take my turn, I guess, on some of the stuff. So Gary Smith, you talked about submitting a list of suitable trees, park strip trees to the city council. It's interesting because that's a conversation that we've had periodically here on the Planning Commission when we're talking about landscaping requirements and how to best handle some landscaping requirements we have. So two questions kind of related to that is one, how do we get a copy of that list so that we could maybe potentially refer to that as needed? And two, are there certain trees that are better for different widths of park strips? Because that has been a conversation that we've had in the past about, if ideally this is going to be an 8-foot wide area, but maybe we don't have that much space, so we're only going to go with something less or whatever. So I'm guessing, are there certain trees that are better for maybe narrower park strips versus the ideal wide open park strips?
Yes, and we addressed that in the list. Mackenzie should have a copy of that she can forward to you. And in that we addressed for 4-foot and smaller park strips and 5-foot and larger park strips. We gave them a list of trees that could work in those two situations.
Awesome. We'll check with Mackenzie then. That's perfect. Thank you.
Well,
Chair
and
Heyman,
I'm
could I
glad that
wait?
you asked about that, Kevin, because I would love to see that list as well. And a lot of times we can't dictate what particular trees goes into a particular park strip. But if that resource was available, not just to us, but if it was available on the city's website, I don't know if you guys, I should have looked before I came to this one. If you guys have a trees page, if we could point developers or people who are developing property to that list, say, oh, go look at the city's website. We've got a list of trees that would do well in that. That would be something that we could suggest or encourage as a commission.
Chair Heyman, can I weigh in just on that matter there?
Yes.
Just so you know, and the tree board knows that trees are treated in two different areas of city code and zoning ordinance. The first one is the actual park strip trees. The zoning code references the municipal code. So your list of trees that are currently allowed in the park strip is found in the public works section of the municipal code. The list the tree board is talking about is an amendment to that list. They've gone an exhaustive look at that list and have made some recommendations to that list. And so all your park strip controls, your width of roads, your width of park strips, the trees, plantings in the park strip are controlled through the public works ordinance. And that's where your reference is taken. The zoning code has a reference in general to trees. As you recall, in commercial and industrial developments, we require street fronting trees. However, you should know that the street fronting trees under the zoning ordinances are prohibited except at the permission of the city. So the expectation of the zoning code is that all street fronting trees would be in the private yard areas of commercial and industrial development. If a developer chooses, they can put those street fronting trees in the park strip, but they have to go through a separate application process and approved by the Public Works Director. And if the Public Works Director issues that permit, then the list of the types of trees allowed in the sizes of park strips is what the director looks for. And so I just think you gotta know there's two separate issues that are going on: trees privately in private development, and then trees in the public realm, and they're controlled by two different sections of city code.
So we could suggest all we wanted for people to put things in park strips, but they're going to be limited by whatever the set ordinance is right now, unless the city council decides to expand or change that
Correct.
with regard to the park strips.
And I
Okay.
think that's what the tree board has been working with the council on, is how and what should take place to modify that.
And is the draft tree ordinance that the tree board has submitted, is that something that is looking to change not only the zoning with regard to the park strips, but also the issues with regard to the street fronting trees and trying to maybe change some process with regards to getting permission? Or does that not address that at all?
My understanding is the tree board is addressing the park strip ordinance.
Okay.
We have not done any work on the zoning code. The zoning code does regulate, no, I think actually the municipal code does regulate the nuisance trees also. So the zoning code doesn't define what type of tree is required.
Got it. And with regards to the front facing strip, I mean, it sounds like clearly we as a city have taken the public policy position. We would rather it be a private tree so we don't have to pay for it, deal with it, live with it, and let them have it on the private side. I haven't looked at the ordinance, but I would suspect that it's kind of geared that way, and the goal is to not grant a lot of permission. Like, we're pretty restrictive on granting permission, or are we pretty open on granting permission?
Well, I think it's a mixed bag. The zoning ordinance is more negative to the use in the park strip because it references that the only way you can use the park strip is go to the Public Works Department. So it talks that they're prohibited in the park strip unless the city allows them. So the zoning ordinance takes a view to push them to the yard area. As far as the park strip, though, the park strip ordinance does allow trees and has a limited list right now. So I don't know. I don't think the criteria for turning down trees other than the types is very strong in the Public Works ordinance.
So Cory, just a quick question on that then. The regardless of how permissive the ordinance is for doing different things in the park strip, correct me if I'm wrong, but the understanding is that the property owner is responsible for maintaining whatever's in that park strip, whether it's trees or grass or anything else, right?
Under a city ordinance in the municipal code, the park strip directly in front of a property, the maintenance is the obligation of the owner. However, that doesn't negate some of the controversy that may have arisen in the recent past, is where the city has gone in and trimmed trees, and that certainly doesn't make a property owner all that happy. Well, depending. Some have requested that their park strip tree be removed. Others we've gone in and trimmed, and obviously if they enjoy that tree, they've not been pleased with some of the trimming. So it's kind of a mixed bag. The city will do some maintenance, but technically under ordinance, it's the property fronting the street, the obligation for maintenance.
This kind of brings up something that I'm interested in, and maybe tree board, you can help us understand this, or Cory, or both of you. Like Joy mentioned, you know, we're in a city that is, every city kind of has an age of a rough age of the houses and the types of plantings that have been around. Newer cities have, you know, smaller plantings, and they haven't come and grown to be something that maybe that they have to talk about like we do have to here. But has the tree board come up with a procedure or plan of how to deal with those types of situations? because like Joy mentioned, and kind of like what you're saying, Cory, if the owner is enjoying the tree and yet the city's saying, well, this is causing a nuisance or something, what's that procedure look like? Or if the owner says, yeah, this is something that I don't like, and is the city going through it? And then is that in the public space, and how does that affect what the public is enjoying? So I just want to kind of have a conversation about how, like, have you submitted any kind of procedural suggestion to the city council? Is that in the ordinance anywhere? Or do we have an understanding of what that looks like?
Well, just from my perspective, I think that's the debate that's been going on with the tree board and the council about creating policies. I haven't attended the meeting, so I don't know the in-depth, but I think that's the conflict, is that the city does reserve a right to trim when there's a nuisance or there's a problem. The city has assisted in taking some trees out. Also, the political element comes into play, that if the city wants to take a tree out and somebody really wants it, obviously the elected officials start hearing the conflict. So I don't know if the tree board had created a specific policy. You could probably answer that.
We gave the city council some suggestions and guidelines, but that's going to be a major task for the city council to change and approve. But yes, we gave them guidelines on nuisance trees and heritage trees and different kinds of tree classifications. But like I say, it's it'll be a major change to the ordinance as is.
So I guess I would just encourage you to continue as a board to, even though you've given your first kind of draft, I think because we deal a lot with renovations, tear downs, new builds, all these types of things that do affect trees frequently. So I just think I would encourage you to continue to work on like a procedure so that the city council can say, yes, this is something that we support or don't support or whatever, and why, so that we can have that in the ordinance, so that developers and then it can guide us as planning commissioners to know how we can improve or kind of tweak some of these, building, renovations or different things that are happening as well. It would be helpful for us, I think, too.
I will comment and say I love the sidewalks that kind of curve. I think that they're pretty. I think that they give character to the city, and I like the idea that you could achieve nodes. Somebody described them as nodes to put the trees on. Have you guys looked at identifying places where that type of sidewalking might be appropriate? I mean, the thing that kind of jumped to mind for me was the historic district, where you've got a couple of houses with sidewalks to nowhere. And I think eventually those sidewalks are gonna match up. But have you guys thought about where might be appropriate in the city to put those types of serpentine walkways?
We have not done that yet. In our discussion, like over the past year, is where we spent most of our time on, looking at the trees and what trees would be good specifically for our climate, for our area, here's trees that would be good in smaller spaces, here are the less nuisance trees. We got all that together, and when we did bring that to the city council, there's some differing of opinions among the city council on even having trees in park strips or not. And so then that's kind of where it just kind of got set to the side. And so and this addresses also your question earlier about, is there a website? Is there something where we can kind of guide people to? So what we had considered doing with this information, because what we were bringing to the city council was suggestions on the ordinance, the specific ordinance that we currently have, which is, like was mentioned, 4 feet wide park strips or wider. And the trees that are in those park strips currently are grandfathered in, regardless of if they are a little bit smaller, park strips and things like that. So there's some of those specifics that are in the ordinance. And the only thing that we were addressing in the ordinance was, well, here's the list of trees that the city currently says are approved for park strip trees. And we said, some of these trees wouldn't be a good idea for park strip. You know, a couple of these we would totally take off the list. And then here's some that we would add just so that we have a wider range of possibilities if people are considering adding trees to a park strip. So that was the only thing that we were addressing when we brought this to the city council. There wasn't even the addressing of, well, let's do this or this. It was just the addressing of we would suggest removing some of these, and we would suggest here's a couple more trees that would be, you know, reasonable within this space. And again, that wasn't received in a way of like, oh yes, you know, we'd like to change that right now. And so that list that we have, we decided to shift to, instead of it being just for park strips, we thought, well, let's add this. So we're currently in the process of creating a website, a page for trees, so that even the citizens can, you know, like, hey, if I want to, like I added, when I moved in here, I did a whole bunch of landscaping in my yard, and I added about 7 trees into my yard. And I spent a year and a half of doing my own research of what trees would be good, what trees would be, you know, for the right space in my yard. And we would like to be able to make it easier for everyone so that they just go, oh, I can click right there and there's all this information. Here's the trees, here's, you know, the things that like I spent a year and a half on researching myself, you know, there it is right there on the website. So what we've considered doing is this list that we gave, that we can have Mackenzie get to you as well. We decided to kind of change it to, you know, city tree board suggestions of trees, and here's the information. Here's how to plant a tree. Here's how to trim a tree. Here's, you know, like, you know, probably shouldn't plant it this close to your house, or, you know, some of those recommendations, those types of things. We are working on making that accessible to everyone, because right now with the ordinance, it was originally created for park strip trees, and then we just decided that wasn't really going anywhere when we brought that to the council, because there's just a couple of different opinions that it just felt like it wasn't really going anywhere right now. So we're like, well, let's at least get this information out. And I do think that it's wise for everyone to kind of understand, like, what is our goal? What is our city's goal, you know, for the planning commission, for city tree, for maintenance, for everyone? What is our goal with these trees? You know, because there are differing opinions of, there is maintenance, there is, you know, some of the problems that trees cause with their roots and things like that. And then also, like, so what is our goal? Is our goal to just remove every single problem tree, which some people may say yes, but then what is that going to create? So anyway, I'm not sure if I answered all your questions, but I did go to the website. I did bring up that answer. So let me know if you have more.
Chair Heyman, I could add to the other half of your question on the serpentine issue. I think one of the challenges that we have is since we kind of have everybody here, one of the challenges that I see in the planning is that we kind of have 2 sets of right of ways in a rough sense. We have the Old Town, which is the Platte area, which had fairly wide roads. The Platte of Zion kind of idea that entered into Utah created these fairly wide roads. Through time in the Old Town Platte, a lot of streets were either vacated or narrowed. And so we have kind of, it's probably still has some significant wide areas that you talk about with no sidewalks and various stages of development with a park strip sidewalk system. So we probably have some room in the Old Town areas to look at the widths of the right of ways of the platted Old Town lot roads and see what we can work with. I can say since the Old Town Plat, though, by the time you're looking at most of Centerville, the street width right-of-way requirement for a local road is 50 feet. That's unique because a lot of cities still maintain a 60-foot in a subdivision area. So if you go to a lot of the suburban cities, you will see that subdivision roads with a single family home, that right-of-way is 60 feet wide. Centerville is only 50 feet. So we have a typical loss of 10 feet. If we build a standard road that has the asphalt that varies between 29 and 31 or 32 feet, plus the 2-foot pan for the curb, generally on your 50-foot road, you only have an 8-foot park strip with sidewalk. And so I think that's the competing interest, is that most of our roads are built where we only have 8 feet to decide park strip and sidewalk widths. And so I think that's the challenge for 2. Serpentining and noting is difficult unless we change our street standards. And that would likely apply only to new development. So we'd be looking at our areas where we still have residential development, because I think reconstructing roads is a whole different ball game to being playing. And so should we change that there? So we have the park strip width for the health of the tree, and we have the sidewalk width, where in the standard planning, 4-foot sidewalk is not sufficient for generally comfortable walking. It's a 5-foot sidewalk that is comfortable for walking. So Main Street has been a heavy discussion about the public space plan of Main Street, because we're only working with 8-foot park strips. And there were ideas of putting things into the park strip that made UDOT uncomfortable or city council uncomfortable. But yet the competing interest is we'd like wider sidewalks. How do we accomplish wider sidewalks when we don't have the right of way? And are we going to do it through an encumbrance of zoning to get another couple of feet for a pedestrian easement? Are we going to try to acquire the excess right of way to get the wider sidewalks? And so I think that's the real challenge is our streets are fairly narrow, or they're built to a status that we would have to tear out and move curb and gutter to narrow the asphalt down in order to create the wider park strips. So I think it's a significant challenge.
Cory, would that still apply though on like new subdivisions? Because I know a lot of what happens, we are built out quite a bit, but what I foresee and what has been happening coming before the commission is someone will take some land and create a new subdivision within a deeper lot, or, you know, a couple lots together. So could that still apply there?
Well, we currently only require 50 feet for new subdivisions. So we'd have to increase the city specification if we wanted wider park strips.
But you were saying it would only affect new development, but I'm just saying it would also affect new subdivisions, right?
If we change the city spec.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
I've got a question, maybe tree board and staff can answer it, and it was alluded to earlier, but typically you have a little bit of conflict between a planning commission and city council and ideals and goals for what we want to have in terms of trees in the city. And then you have our city manager and our public works directors who are thinking in terms of, gosh, I want to reduce our expenses. I want to make my life easier. I want to make my employees' life easier. There comes a conflict with that. I side more on the side of the trees and hope that our community will feel that they are an asset to our overall well-being, valuations, et cetera, et cetera. How do we reconcile that? And maybe members of the tree board can take that, maybe Cory from the staff side, but yeah, I don't know. We could talk for endlessly on this, so maybe it's just short, but I think that's one of the challenges that we face as a planning commission, making recommendations to the city council, is getting everybody on the same page, building consensus around what we want for the city, and really ordinances that underlie those goals as we're talking about street widths and park strip widths and how we can enforce that. It's a lot more complicated than the ideals. I think we all probably, for the most part, share, but how can we improve that and get people or build consensus towards that? Again, we could talk for hours about it, but maybe some short snippets might help the whole group.
Well, I'll short snip kind of the negative side is so that the tree board can give you the positive, hopeful side. I think the difficulty from a staff perspective, as you recognize, is the fiscal management of the city and its infrastructure. If you're dealing with the park strips like we typically deal with, 4 feet wide, you have the infrastructure that can compete with the interest of the growth of the tree. That's the sidewalk, that's the water meters, that's the gas lines, the utilities that may run through. You're seeing more and more that utilities don't like the park strips. So they're starting to use more and more of the front yards of homes to put the utilities in, because that gives them the space, the uncompetitive space. But then you compete now with the homeowner who has put in some private landscaping, and somebody wants to come in, and even though they're going to restore it, tear it up to put in a utility. You get that conflict that's going on. So you're right, it's to make not only staff's life easier, but it's the management. So, I think that's the issue, is that we have sidewalks. McKinsey, when she first was even employed with the city, she came on as an intern. She did an entire sidewalk study of where we have displaced sidewalk, because we have insurance liabilities that are hanging over the city's head about sidewalk and the claims of that. And there's a substantial cost to the city if we go without a proper maintenance program. So there was a huge inventory of that, and a lot of the damage, not all of it, you got the frost heave, but a lot of damage is by these trees and the root systems. And so that competing interest of the park strip for utilities, the health of the tree itself. We've taken out trees that were mature, but they struggled in their health. You see that in downtown environments, like urban corridors. If you look at 25th Street in Ogden, they have the grates for the trees. They have the shade locus there, but the trees don't actually thrive very well in that environment, and it competes with the infrastructure. So yeah, it's not only making life easier, it's also fiscal management of the taxpayer money, the insurance claim risk management, the damage of infrastructure that somebody gets hurt on. And yet we all, particularly in the planning field, we all recognize the benefit of trees. I mean, I'm talking negatively, but we have a landscape ordinance that requires street fronting trees because there's value in the trees. There's value in the aesthetics, the noise, the filtration of the air. They have this value. And then if you have a mature tree and you cut it down, it could be worth $50,000, and somebody wants that to be reimbursed. So there's my negative. My negative is it causes a lot of grief for city and fiscal management to deal with trees. Now, tree board, redeem the planner in me and show me the aesthetics.
Well, I'm actually going to jump in before the tree board, because I thought it was interesting, Cory, that you talked about the fiscal management of the city. And I actually have been following this removal of trees in my neighborhood quite closely. And I was just super interested to see how much the city is spending time, resources, trucks, people on pulling these trees out, not just pulling the trees out, but then fixing the sidewalk, fixing the grass, fixing the sprinkler system. I mean, there was like 7, at one time, there was like 7 trucks outside of my house in my neighborhood. And I was like, wow, we are putting a lot of fiscal resources towards taking down this tree. So I was really surprised at that. So the cost to the city is for sure something I think that's important, the maintenance cost. And also I think it's interesting because we frequently talk about Farmington, like that's like Farmington trees. I know that we all love that street on State Street. And I don't know how many of you have actually walked on the sidewalk next to those trees, but next time you drive, at least look at it. the trees are right next to the sidewalk. And a lot of the sidewalks are not flat. Everyone says, well, Farmington has these really tall, you know, these really wide park strips, but I think it's a decision. And I guess to answer your question in my mind, Spence, is that Farmington has created a culture of supporting trees. Not just that they have different situation, they have those giant trees are right next to the sidewalk and they do buckle the sidewalk. And so I think they're a replacement of the sidewalk, grinding down a route, replacing the sidewalk, to me, fiscally, is pretty similar to what I saw happen in my neighborhood, where pulling out a full tree, replacing the sidewalk, replacing the grass, replacing the sprinkler system. So I think there needs to be, at least Spencer, to answer your question, there needs to be a culture in our city, not just like a few people that like it or a few people that don't like it, but we kind of have to come to that consensus as a culture to say, yeah, this is going to buckle the sidewalk, or these are grandfathered in because of X, and we're going to do everything we can to mitigate the problem on the sidewalk. And if it can't be done, then yeah, the tree goes out, but not, oh, there's something on the sidewalk, the tree goes out, kind of thing. Now, tree board, you can say anything. I just jumped in.
I was going to say, I don't want to be the only one, so I'm kind of waiting and giving, you know, the other members an opportunity. I think Spencer brings up a really great point and a really great question, because as well as Becky and then Cory, I think you did a good job of explaining, like, yeah, so here's our problems. And we also recognize there's benefits to trees. So how do we do this? And I think that what Becky said, I think, is a key point of, like, well, where do we stand as a city? I mean, Farmington, I think, like Farmington, I can't remember. I think they call themselves the city of tree. They don't call themselves Tree City USA, but they're like the city of trees or something like that. Like, and they have like their picture is a tree. Like, so they obviously. And one of the things that they did last year was they offered a discounted price of trees for people, for citizens in their city, to be able to come and buy these trees, and in encouraging that people plant trees. So where do we stand as a city? What are our goals? Because obviously, I mean, my personal thought is, well, kids cause problems too, but are we going to say, no kids, because the liability of kids is just like it would be easier to not have kids. And guess what? There's people actually who do decide that, like, no, you know what? I'm not having kids. But in general, like, is that what's really best for a city? And so my personal thought is it really best that, like, I get that there's problems. My kid sometimes has diarrhea, and that's a pretty, you know, that's a problem, but like, I'm going to work through that, or, you know. And so I don't have an answer, Spencer, but I think that that's a really great question of where do we stand? And there's differing opinions. So how do we come to a consensus of, okay, well, you hate trees and I like trees. And that's why as a city tree board, we've tried to say, we recognize that here's some of the problems. And so here's ways to mitigate that. Here's ways, you know, so on our end, we're trying to say, here's better trees for these areas. Here's ways that we could suggest, you know, encouraging trees. But I think it does come down to, where do we stand as a city of, like, do we really love these trees? Because one of the things that was brought to me by a citizen, a concern when they saw all these trees, these 8 trees in my neighborhood being removed, was, what are we saying as a city? Because what was brought to the attention of the homeowners, and these were all older homeowners who didn't want to have to deal with a tree, and the city told them, well, we'll remove that tree for free. You don't have to pay for it at all. We will remove it. So this citizen that was very concerned about this said to me, hey, what are we saying as a city? Yeah, let's get rid of the trees. We'll even pay for it. We'll get rid of your trees. So that is a question to bring up and say, where do we stand?
Becky, have we ever done an analysis of the cost to grind down a root and replace the sidewalk as opposed to tearing a full tree down the 7 truck? I mean, your example is probably the worst case scenario, but I think it would be valuable to at least show the position. Hey, look, we can still have trees. Yes, we're going to have to do some maintenance. And here's the cost differential to tear down an entire tree versus do some maintenance work on it. And I think that would be helpful, frankly, to enable some understanding with constituents in the city. That to me, that seems like a good way to, I don't know, promote our tree story. Even within the city management staff, we can say, okay, look, guys, we understand this isn't going to be perfect, but you just spent X number of dollars to take down a tree, as opposed to let's leave the tree there and maybe do some repair work where we can.
Right.
I think that cost difference analysis would be helpful.
Well, and I think Cory mentioned, I don't know if we've done that analysis, and maybe that's something that the tree board could figure out as far as like what that would cost versus other solutions to these trees. That's where if we had some sort of process for removal or process for just dealing with, which Gary mentioned that you presented some sort of mitigation process. But Cory, you said that Mackenzie spent time looking at all of the sidewalk, and that's very helpful to know. Yeah, this is where the situation is, but it also might be really helpful to know, like Spencer asked, there's a problem with the sidewalk, but let's suggest some solutions to what could happen right here. I don't know. I did take pictures. I actually snapped a couple pictures of the cars and each time they came, because it was multiple times they came. I was like, wow, this is the 3rd visit, and now, okay, there's another visit, so it's just interesting. I do know that the city, I did actually reach out to the mayor, and I know the city council approved some monies to go to deal with some trees, but it would be very nice to know what that cost differentiation is between removing the tree and replacing the sidewalk and the grass and this.
I think we can get you the sidewalk, the budget, I think this year, and don't quote me, but I think the council set aside $100,000 for sidewalk repair, and that does not cover all the damaged sidewalks. So there's a significant cost on the long-term maintenance of sidewalks and the cost of the city, and versus cutting out the tree. And I'm sure the tree board we could put together, and Mackenzie could help. We could get the numbers together for removal of tree and what even some of the public works crews experienced, and get those rough estimates. But I would venture to guess that the protection of infrastructure is going to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to the taxpayer.
Hello, this is Scott Zeidler. Hey, there are some cities who have chosen to grind the sidewalk offsets, and that is an acceptable mitigation to public risk as a trip hazard. What I've generally observed is there is only so much width to that sidewalk that can be expected to remove through shaving, and then you lose some of, I think, like an engineering or technical specification to the thickness of the sidewalk. One of the reasons that sidewalks are lifting in particular is because the water demands of the tree are so great that it is strengthening its lateral roots to seek out, obtain, and transport water to the crown of the tree. Trees situated close to the darkened road surface experience greater transpirational loss because of the long heat period that extends late into the evening. That water needs to be replaced. And as that tree becomes more mature and more sizable as a specimen, it will then require more water to renew the cells and tissues which allow that tree to be healthy and functional. So there is a dynamic between the large trees that we hope to have and their longevity in that park strip and the water requirement that they need to sustain all their functional capacities. When we witness tree drought, we see other disease and decays and perhaps even insect vulnerabilities occur within our street trees. So just generally, the street park strip is an imperfect planting area for trees and how they have adapted their life cycle, in particular large stature trees. So we get back to the notion of cyclical populations of trees, which are allowed to gain a certain size, and then they're removed and then replaced as is decided. And the other part is that, you know, the availability of and cost of water, in particular secondary water. I'm a beneficiary of the Dual Creek Irrigation Company, and my water has been cost to me, you know, that's reasonable, and I can water my landscape, including the park strip. As water prices increase due to the increased population and demand of all waters in Utah, one has to ask, are these park strips going to be a sustainable zone for horticulture, or will they be converted, like some of my neighbors have done, into a rock, gravel, bunch grass, decorative low flower-bearing plants as opposed to trees? And that gets into another set of natural resource value, and that's water. So that's one thing to think about in the future, is the availability and cost of waters. And, you know, the trees that are there will always require water to sustain their health and life. If we cut those waters back, or if we restrict their growth space, the trees will react in a pretty reliable fashion. And they'll become weakened specimens and probably even become more hazardous in that zone, of the street zone where you have frequent targets. This was an outcome in Salt Lake City with their maple trees that I understand. Water availability and abundance was restricted, and thus a certain species or groups of species of trees suffered as a result of that change in availability of water, also compounded by drought, which our region is regularly experiences. But yeah, the dynamic of tree roots and trees are very, very challenging, and the sidewalk lift is an outcome of trees' necessity for water. That's all I wanted to add to that.
I appreciate that perspective, and I wonder, I'm sure that when you presented your options to the city council, you suggested some that are more, maybe not native to Utah desert, but more applicable to Utah water situation. Would that be correct?
I don't believe we addressed water specifically, no. Because there's not many trees that could be grown in a drought condition that would be suitable for a street tree. I mean, you wouldn't want the drought resistant trees in the street.
No. But did you take into consideration, I'm guessing you took into consideration our, you know.
Yeah, we kind of came up with that, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Well, it sounds like you guys have thought through a lot of issues, and the city council has a lot to think on. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of these decisions that we're talking about are policy decisions that'll have to be made at the city council level. But I've learned a lot tonight. This is great. I don't want to keep you guys forever. I really appreciate you for coming and talking with us. Do any of my other commissioners have any questions of the tree board?
I have one last quick question. Cory, you talked about $100,000 for sidewalks. Scott had talked about one of the requirements for Tree City USA is to spend $2 per capita on trees and stuff, and that would be for Centerville just a little under $40,000. Do we know what that budget is for the city? How much does the city spend on trees?
I don't have numbers specifically. If I recall, I think our parks director is involved in that. I don't know how much that's covered under the city parks, and the expenditures of all our parks and the maintenance of trees is where I'm first assuming that is applied.
Yeah,
One
as,
last,
as a
go
city
ahead.
tree board, we're unaware of that number. We don't know that.
Okay, thanks.
One last question. Have you as a city tree board reached out? I know that I think it was Scott that mentioned some of the benefits of being a tree city are that you have an extensive network to figuring out solving some of these issues with neighboring cities that have dealt with these. Have you reached out to any neighboring cities to find out, in our similar circumstance, to find out how they've allocated monies or how they've solved this solution, or maybe even how much money it costs them to grind a route or grind a sidewalk versus take a tree out? Have you reached out to anyone to kind of figure that out?
I guess no is the answer.
Go ahead, Gary.
I guess you can take no as an answer for that one since nobody.
Well, that would be interesting information too. I think if we really are, if we're a tree city and we have, these things, because then I think that would give us further tools to add to. We wanted to talk to you so that we can have more tools in our planning belt to make sure that we are looking at and considering trees and learning more about trees. And so I guess I would encourage you to reach out to that network and find any kind of solutions that you think would be applicable. And if they're ordinance based, great. You can go to the city council that way. If they're not ordinance based, then and they apply to planning commission, I know I for one would really love to hear them and hear how we can solve some of these problems with well-trusted solutions.
I would like to add, this is Grant. When Scott was talking about the sidewalks, he meant to grind down the uplift. You grind the cement, not the tree. The last thing you do is grind the tree roots.
Great.
Also, look to Brigham City. There's a city that committed to trees. And they use a tree that's not known for its neatness with its roots. So just a thought.
And I'm going to put in one last comment that you guys completely can ignore if it's a stupid comment. But if you guys are going to be putting up a website and providing tips and tricks for people who are interested in planting trees, I'm personally I'm hoping to landscape a rather ugly backyard. And part of that, we met with a landscape designer who suggested various trees and showed me pictures of them. And when I was telling my mom about him, she said, "Oh, actually, we have one of those trees in my yard. It's over here. You should look at it the next time you come over." And I thought, oh, that would be really helpful to see what this tree actually looks like in a yard. And so maybe a way of promoting some of the ways that we have trees here to say, if you're interested in planting this type of a tree, you can find examples of them here or here or here. Go look at them and see what the trees look like. So just a thought, which you can completely disregard if you want to. But for me, planting my backyard, not being a tree person, it was helpful for me to go see what actual trees look like in a non-internet setting.
No, I totally agree. I think that would be, I think that would be great. I unfortunately had to cut down 8 trees in my yard this past year that are old. Am I frozen? I'm frozen. No, I'm okay. Okay.
You're good.
And so I would love that. Unfortunately, they were bug ridden and hollow in the middle. And I would love the same thing to know, oh, that would work here. That would not work there. That would be great. And I totally agree with you. I don't think it was at it all. I think it would be wonderful.
That wasn't a Russian olive, was it, Shaylin?
Oh, what?
A Russian olive tree? I'm just joking with you.
I
A Russian olive is not, it's a weed tree, is
Oh.
like Cory saying that. But it
I am-
smells really good, Cory. It's really like, it smells like Utah.
It
Cut
does.
them all down. Cut them all down.
Oh, I love it.
Well, thank you to our tree board for taking time. We know that you guys are a volunteer board and we really appreciate you for sharing some of your time to come speak with us tonight. So we appreciate it. I look forward to seeing what you guys do in the future. I look forward to seeing what the city council does with the proposed ordinance that you have. And so we'll watch that.
Yeah,
So-
thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us and giving us your time. Thank you.
Yeah, hats off to Becky. This was her idea. So I'm glad that she raised it. All right. Thank you guys all for my tree board. You are excused.
Thank you.
Next on our, moving right along on our agenda today, we had a short agenda today as compared to prior weeks. So the second and only other really remaining substantive thing that we'll be doing are to talk about our goals. So with that, I will turn the time over to staff.
There, I should be back. Thank you, Chair Heyman. We pulled one item from the agenda and put it onto your next week's agenda. So we shortened it up a little bit for logistics purposes. I've tried an attempt, as I promised at your last meeting, to just take your goals and apply some timeframes to them and give you a little summary of where things at and a idealistic work order that it should be taken in. And I refer to that, and we can refer to it on a share screen if you want to discuss it. But just a couple of thoughts I have from a workflow, particularly that are important from my perspective. And I think Lisa will weigh in on a goal that we've had and that she's been working on from her perspective. But we're kind of in this hiatus with the South Main Street plan. We've held a hearing on the general plan portion. We received some public comment. And then we were to kind of, as a commission, go back and mull that over. And then we've had the heavy-handed issue of COVID and some other matters that have changed things around for our lives. And so that's something of concern to me about dropping the ball. We did some extensive noticing to make sure people were engaged. I think we had an engagement that worked. We'd always love the whole city to turn out, but relatively given the policy of a general plan, we had at least a good turnout that gave some comment, and it seemed to be, for the most part, fairly positive for the direction we're going. But if we extend this out too long, I fear that the transparency of everybody wondering how did we get to a point, how do we get to a decision-making point? And whether that decision-making point is a recommendation of the council that gets critiqued, or whether we move something on to the city council and they start adopting something and people feel left out of the process, or they weren't able to see the meat and potatoes of the ordinance or the general plan and found something that they didn't particularly care with. Obviously, the more negative someone perceives something, the more heightens their concern about the decision-making process. So I raise that as a concern of how we address that and how we make that a work goal to move it through. And if you recall, we identified 3 stages at that meeting: work on the general plan and get that moving forward, come back with the zoning ordinance, then move that forward, and then come back with the use list that we all have known has been a long standing unanswered question about whether we're adding additional commercial uses or not. And so I just raise that as a concern to somehow we can get to some type of predictable manner so that as such a broad policy is adopted, that we understand that we've given it the transparency. Because one of the things I think with the general plan is it's easily shelved, easily ignored, easily disregarded unless you have a buy-off of the community and the vision. And if we adopt a plan and it's not as transparent and open in the process, and I'm not saying we're not being transparent, I mean to the public perception that they didn't understand, because we're being transparent with all our noticing and everything we do, just their perception that they didn't understand it. You know, I don't want to see 6 to 8 months later, we're coming back and amending it and changing it again because we somehow erred in vetting it out with the public. Now, that's my high ideal. Plans change, guidelines change, just hopefully not 2 weeks after you adopt them. And so that's a concern I have with the South Main Street. The other one is the transportation element. We have a deadline under the previous Senate Bill 34 from last year. Remember, we had to modify our moderate income housing plan slightly, and we had to get that in by December 1st of 2019. We started a little late in the season, and we were pushing and calling special sessions with the council to get that adopted by the deadline. Because I was wrapped up in the Main Street plan and some other matters, I don't want to repeat that again, and we've hit July. And I'm starting to get nervous about the transportation element getting done by December 1st. I get the favored element of trying to think of what it would look like and what it would be. And I certainly, in an early draft of this element from a staff perspective, you know, we try to just throw a bunch of darts at the target. And, you know, it could be pretty extensive or it could be not so extensive, depending on how we perceive the value of our role given Centerville in the moderate income housing plan. So somehow we need to get through that process. I've got something that we can just throw a bunch of darts at, but obviously some of them would be controversial or ineffective for that matter, for all we know. And so Mackenzie's doing some research for me, but I'd like to get that started in the vetting process. But I have to notice that we intend to change the general plan before we start into that process. And so that's why July is getting nervous for me, because by the time you get something through the council or through the commission that you're comfortable with, we always have, where will the council be? And if I put them in a position that it's the week before the deadline, they some reason don't like me. I don't know why, but they just don't like me. So that's a concern with me. I think how we address the South Main Street and how do we get started on the transportation element. I know there's other important goals, but those are kind of my priorities. And Lisa, I know I see you online. You have a priority that you've been working on for a long time. I assume you want that off your desk at some point.
Yes, so I was talking with Cory earlier about our goals, and so as you know, I've been working with the Planning Commission on getting our subdivision ordinance updated. You know, we had a consultant draft it, and we worked our way through, and I just have 2 more chapters, new chapters on property line adjustments and the streets and utility easements. So I've been trying to work through those, and maybe we can have a goal to try and get the subdivision, a draft completed by the end of the year. So I think we can add that back on our plate here pretty soon.
Lisa, when you submit that, or Cory, even when we do updates to different ordinances, do you provide us redline drafts from where the current ordinance is to where you're proposing it to be?
Yeah, usually I prepare a red line, but this it was a complete rewrite of our subdivision ordinance. So we have not been providing a red line of our current ordinance. But when I go through each chapter, I try to give the Planning Commission an explanation, a verbal explanation of here's how, you know, we used to do it and here's what we're proposing here. But
kind of a narrative summary brief.
Practical, because it's a complete rewrite and a complete reorganization of that title.
Yeah, from my perspective, if we're just doing a portional ordinance, yes, we give you the red lines. If you take the South Main Street, it's kind of split. You'll see the reference sections that are outside the South Main Street. They'll see the paragraphs where you actually do see some red line and changes, because we're changing other sections unrelated to the South Main Street, but to bring cohesiveness to it so that there's not a conflict. You do have red lines on the neighborhood plan sections, but the new South Main Street element is like Lisa's indicating, it is a complete rewrite. So we're just ignoring the original and proposing a new draft.
Yeah, and so my plan is to try and get these final 2 chapters done, and then also get back, you know, the planning commission had given me a lot of amendments to some of the various chapters, and probably however the planning commission wants to do it, but just bring back an entire subdivision ordinance and kind of work our way through it. And I think, you know, we've been looking at it chapter by chapter, but we really need to do a once over and make sure that the procedures flow and that, you know, it all works together. So, but I think we're pretty close.
And then what we do is we just provide the old South Main Street plan as a backup document. And then you have the new draft, which is completely different. It was a significant change to just redline with, it's not like amending, we're just changing the complete direction.
Well, Cory, in terms of priorities, I mean, the thing that's on fire here, the thing that has to get done is this transportation plan element. So it seems like to me, I mean, all of these goals are worthy goals, but that's the one that seems like we need to tend to it first. So I would be in favor of elevating that one above everything else. Let's go ahead and get that one started. Let us know what we as a commission need to do to help you in that process. Does anybody have any objections on the commission with starting with that piece first?
I don't have any objections about that. I will just put a tiny little plug in for residential buffering, just because if any of you are familiar with debt snowball and how that works, you tackle the smallest debt first, the easiest one, so you have success, and then you use that energy and that momentum to go forward.
Yes, your residential buffering was scheduled for actually this meeting. I had to actually put it to this meeting, but we're unable to get it posted at the state's website. And so I had to delay it in order to get it posted properly at the state website. And so it is scheduled for your next meeting.
Great. So yeah, beyond that, I just think, and that's something that the citizens have wanted, something the city council has wanted, and that's something easily achievable. So beyond that, I think I don't have any problems.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that, Becky, because I was thinking the same thing. I mean, the South Main Street corridor plan, I want to get that one done just as much as everybody does. I mean, we're all sick of dealing with this thing. I feel like this has been the albatross that has been hanging over my neck for this entire planning commission. And I mean, and it sucks the timing, because I finally felt like at our last meeting, that was the demarcation of the last time things were normal before everything went crazy. But we had so many people turn out. I was so excited. We finally had, I felt like we were getting some buy-in to what it was that we were doing, and we were getting great feedback. And then, you know, COVID kind of, it derailed us, and people are worried about a lot of things right now. I mean, keeping jobs and keeping homes and figuring out what we're all going to do with our kids when they go back to school. And nobody is really focused on that. And I really feel like to do a good job on the South Main Street corridor, we've really got to get public buy-in, and people's bandwidths right now are just this big. So I'm thinking right now is probably not the time to tackle it. Maybe we let it lie for a bit. We've done good work on it, and we wait for a time where we can re-raise it, where the public is gonna be able to focus more attention on it. So what do you need from us, Cory, to do the transportation plan element? Just a direction to let's get going.
Let's get going. So I can get the notice out. We can start having, as soon as I get that out, then I will start feeding you some the target with a bunch of darts, so we can start narrowing down, get our minds around what it's trying to accomplish. So that as a commission, we can get feedback from you on where your values are. Given again, I put it as a moderate, so I think we can get it done without an extreme amount of effort. But we do need to kind of have to brainstorm and then see what's useful to us. Then I can start having that discussion with you as a commission. We can narrow it down to kind of the direction we're going, and then I will formalize it and ready it for the public hearing process.
Great. So we've got three major goals coming up. We're going to do the transportation plan element. We're going to do the residential buffering. We're going to get through Lisa's favorite project because she wants to get that one off of her plate too. And we will have chopped 3 things off our list. So that'll be great. And then we can decide whether we want to come back to maybe once we clear those, we re-up West Centerville neighborhood plan update. Maybe that's the next thing that we try to tackle. But I feel good about that direction. And thank you, Cory. I really appreciate you I love your guys's red, yellow, green system because it's helpful for me, but I appreciate you for thinking through that issue to help us figure out where to prioritize to.
I was going to say thank you too, because I know that was my request. So I always feel bad when I give you extra work. So I appreciate you doing that to help us.
Job security.
Oh, I must be very good for your job security then, Cory. You must just love me.
I do. I always have. We go to town with one another, but I love it. So I always appreciate you.
Thank you for your work.
All right, moving us right along. Item number 3 on our agenda is the Community Development Director's report. So I'll turn the time back over to staff.
I won't bring that up on a share, but it's a significant agenda. We're sorting out a couple of applications that are incomplete, but we're trying to give the customer service an opportunity for them to fix it because today was the deadline. But I have a total of 6 items scheduled for your agenda. I'm not sure all of them will make it, but yes, residential buffering is on there. We have a Parish Creek PDO amendment. We have a rezone request. We have a development in the industrial zone that I remember off the top of my head that they would like to do. If you remember the Jed Taylor piece in the far corner right there by the ramp with all the equipment and dirt, somebody wants to reuse that site. So we have 6 items tentatively scheduled, so it should be a pretty heavy meeting. And
what
then
happened with the Bell rezone?
the city council last night considered that. Thanks for reminding me. And it was tabled until their next meeting. It seems like there is some discussion about denying it. But another council member asked for some time to think about it. The typical expectation of the council is they don't like to make the same decision or the decision on something they've held a public hearing on without at least mulling it over. And so there seems to be maybe some cooling off time in the moment of the council meeting, and we'll come back at their next meeting and see how it really plays out.
Excellent, thank you. And the last item on our agenda is to review our July 8th minutes. So we'll do this in the regular course, page by page. If you have a change, let me know. And I'll go a little slower just in case people need time to jump in with their mute buttons. So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6. Seeing no one that's offering comments, the chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
I'll second.
I moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. And seeing that's unanimous, they're approved. Thank you. I've got to figure out an easier way to do that via Zoom, but since you're all on screen, I can make you hold up your hands. Yeah. All right. So that was fantastic. I feel like I learned a lot about trees today. I'm excited for our city, and hopefully there will be something that comes out of that. So, all right. Well, thank you guys all, and I will move that we adjourn.
I second.
Second.
All those in favor, hold up your hand.
Aye.
All right. Okay, see you guys all. Stay safe. Thank you guys all for your work, and I will see you guys at our next meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Right.